Aravana was a Xaverian, part of a species known for their intricate designs and keen intellect. But among her kind, her small stature had always been a glaring difference. Standing just 4 feet tall in a society where height symbolized strength and respect, she often found herself overlooked, dismissed, and even ridiculed. Her contributions as an engineer, despite their brilliance, rarely brought her the recognition she deserved. To her, it seemed that no amount of skill could overshadow the prejudice she faced daily. In the bustling hub of Xaveria's central city, Aravana worked tirelessly in her laboratory, crafting solutions that powered entire sectors of their society. Her intricate energy conduits, designed to optimize planetary resource use, were revolutionary. Yet, when presented, credit often went to taller colleagues who barely understood her designs. She accepted it silently, suppressing the bitterness that threatened to take root. Recognition, she believed, wasn't for someone like her. Her evenings were no better. Social gatherings were a test of endurance, filled with whispered remarks and sidelong glances. It was tradition for Xaverians to pair with those deemed their equal in stature and prestige, and Aravana's height excluded her from that pool. She found solace in solitude, her heart heavy with the thought that she might never find a connection with another soul. In a culture obsessed with physical presence, she felt invisible. Despite her isolation, Aravana's heart brimmed with compassion. She often volunteered her skills to repair the homes of less fortunate Xaverians or craft tools for disabled citizens. For her, these moments of quiet service brought a sense of purpose that accolades never could. Yet, even in these acts of kindness, she couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. As much as she gave to others, she struggled to give herself the same grace. The Xaverian emphasis on size was deeply ingrained. From birth, children were conditioned to equate height with power and dominance. Leaders were chosen based on physical presence, their decisions often more symbolic than practical. Those who didn't fit this mold, like Aravana, were subtly pushed to the periphery. It wasn't an outright rejection but a quiet relegation to roles where they could work unseen. The pain of being undervalued wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Her turning point came unexpectedly, when a human delegation arrived on Xaveria seeking alliances. Humans, with their diverse forms and capabilities, were unlike anything the Xaverians had encountered. The two species had exchanged communications for years, but this marked their first in-person meeting. Aravana, reluctantly assigned to assist, found herself thrust into an unfamiliar dynamic. The humans marveled at Xaverian technology, and Aravana's work caught their attention. Among them was a man named Elias, a diplomat with an unassuming presence but a sharp mind. Unlike her own people, the humans showed no signs of judgment or condescension. They listened attentively as she explained her innovations, their curiosity genuine and untainted by superficial biases. Elias, in particular, seemed drawn to her explanations. He peppered her with questions, not just about her work but about her culture, her life, and her thoughts. Aravana, unaccustomed to such interest, was cautious. She wasn't sure if his kindness was genuine, or if it came from pity. Yet, his words held a sincerity that slowly chipped away at her walls. For the first time, Aravana saw herself through a different lens. The humans didn't see her as lacking. They saw her as exceptional, a mind capable of solving problems they hadn't even imagined. It was a stark contrast to the treatment she received from her own kind. Still, she couldn't help but wonder, could their admiration be real, or was it simply a misunderstanding of her place in Xaverian society? Elias, seemingly unaware of her internal conflict, continued to engage with her, seeking her input on collaborative projects. Aravana couldn't deny that his demeanor was refreshing. He treated her as an equal, not as someone to be dismissed or pitted. Yet, even as she began to open up, the insecurities ingrained in her by years of societal rejection loomed large. Aravana's interactions with the humans brought her to a crossroads. They challenged her perceptions of herself and the limitations she believed defined her life. Yet, the fear of believing too much in their approval, only to face rejection once more, held her back. Deep down, she wanted to trust their acceptance, to allow herself the possibility of connection. But years of being told she was too small made it hard to take that leap. Her journey wasn't just about gaining the approval of others, it was about confronting the image of herself she had carried for so long. As the humans continued to value her contributions, a seed of hope took root in her heart. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to her than the limitations her society had imposed. And maybe, someone like Elias could help her see that the size of her heart mattered far more than the stature of her frame. Aravana's initial encounters with the human delegation were marked by a blend of curiosity and hesitation. The humans brought an energy unlike anything she had encountered among her own people. They moved with a casual ease, their voices rich with humor and warmth, their questions driven by genuine interest rather than the veiled critiques she was accustomed to. For the first time, her work as an engineer received unreserved admiration, not just from one individual but from an entire group. It was an experience both exhilarating and unsettling for someone who had long been sidelined in her own society. The collaboration between the humans and Xaverians revolved around the repair and optimization of a planetary shield, a critical piece of technology that protected the planet from cosmic debris and environmental anomalies. Aravana had been instrumental in its initial design, yet her contributions had always been overshadowed by others who took the credit. Now, with the humans involved, she found herself at the forefront of discussions, her voice not only heard but actively sought out. Their questions weren't limited to the technical, they wanted to understand the thought processes and creativity behind her work. Among the delegation, Elias stood out not for any grand gestures, but for his unwavering attention and the respect he showed her. While the other humans marveled at the technology, Elias seemed equally fascinated by the person behind it. He asked questions that delved beyond engineering, probing into the cultural nuances of her world and the challenges she faced as a Xaverian of smaller stature. His inquiries were thoughtful and sincere, and for the first time, Aravana felt seen in a way that transcended her physical form or societal role. As the project progressed, the contrast between the humans' attitudes and her own society's norms became increasingly stark. The humans valued collaboration for its own sake, encouraging ideas regardless of the source. In contrast, the Xaverians maintained a rigid hierarchy, where contributions were often assessed based on the individual's perceived status. This difference created moments of tension, particularly when Aravana's Xaverian colleagues bristled at the humans' open praise of her abilities. She felt caught between two worlds, one that undervalued her and another that seemed to lift her beyond what she believed possible. Elias became an unexpected ally in these moments of cultural friction. While he never sought to overshadow her, his quiet support was evident. He would redirect attention to her when others tried to diminish her input, framing his interventions not as acts of defense but as acknowledgments of her expertise. His words carried weight, not because he demanded it but because he spoke with conviction and sincerity. Through his actions, Aravana began to see a version of herself that she had long buried, a version where her worth was intrinsic, not tied to her size or her society's biases. Despite this, self-doubt lingered. Aravana had spent a lifetime internalizing the belief that she was inherently lesser. While the human's acceptance offered a glimpse of another perspective, it also felt fragile, like something that could disappear the moment they truly understood the depth of her insecurities. She struggled to reconcile the praise she received with the critical voice inside her that questioned whether she truly deserved it. This internal conflict cast a shadow over her growing connection with Elias, making her hesitant to fully trust his intentions. Tensions between the two species reached a breaking point when a disagreement arose over the allocation of resources for the shield repair. The humans advocated for a more inclusive approach, suggesting that Aravana's designs should be the foundation for the upgrades. Some of the Xaverians, however, dismissed this idea, arguing that her unorthodox methods were too risky. The criticism stung, not because it was unexpected but because it echoed the doubts she had carried for so long. Yet when Elias spoke up in her defense, emphasizing her expertise and the elegance of her solutions, she felt a flicker of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. The collaboration was not without its challenges. Cultural misunderstandings, differing priorities, and the inherent difficulties of merging two vastly different technological paradigms created moments of friction. Yet, through it all, Aravana found herself leaning into the humans' approach to problem solving. They encouraged her to take risks, to trust her instincts, and to explore ideas that might have been dismissed outright in Xaverian society. It was a liberating experience, one that began to chip away at the constraints she had long placed on herself. Elias's presence became a quiet anchor for her during this tumultuous time. His belief in her wasn't loud or performative, it was steady and unwavering. He treated her not as an anomaly to be pitied but as a peer whose insights he valued deeply. Through his actions, he showed her that her height, her insecurities, and even her fear of rejection were not the sum of her identity. What mattered was the person she was, the brilliance of her mind, the kindness of her heart, and the strength she had shown in the face of constant adversity. As the project neared completion, Aravana began to see the impact of her work not just on the humans but on her own people as well. The Xaverians who had once dismissed her started to acknowledge her contributions, albeit grudgingly. It wasn't a complete shift in perspective, but it was a start. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that change was possible, not just in how others saw her but in how she saw herself. Through the collaboration, Aravana experienced a profound transformation. The humans' acceptance and Elias's unwavering support gave her the courage to confront the insecurities that had defined her life. She began to realize that her worth was not something to be measured by societal standards or external validation but something inherent, something that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. And in Elias, she found a reflection of that truth, a reminder that she was not too small for love, nor too insignificant to be seen. The planetary shield project reached a critical juncture. A sudden malfunction threatened not just the success of the collaboration, but the safety of the entire region. The failure highlighted flaws in the original design that could no longer be ignored, flaws that Aravana had long wanted to address but had been overruled by those in positions of greater authority. Now, with no time for debate, decisive action was required. Aravana stepped forward, her voice steady but firm, outlining a plan that relied on both her intimate knowledge of the system and the human's adaptable approach to problem solving. For the first time, there was no room for hesitation or self-doubt. The urgency of the moment demanded Aravana's full focus, and she delivered. Her small frame allowed her to navigate confined spaces within the infrastructure that others couldn't access, and her ingenuity turned what seemed like insurmountable obstacles into solvable challenges. The humans and Xaverians alike worked under her guidance, following her instructions without question. In those moments, the years of disregard and dismissal faded away. She wasn't the overlooked engineer or the subject of pity, she was the one who could save them all. As the shield stabilized, the sense of relief among the team was palpable. Aravana's plan had worked, preventing a disaster that could have spiraled beyond control. The humans cheered her, their gratitude evident in their every word and gesture. For the Xaverians, the moment was more complex. Many of them, including those who had openly doubted her, were forced to confront the reality of her capabilities. Their silence spoke volumes, a mix of embarrassment and newfound respect. Aravana felt none of the bitterness she might have expected. Instead, she was filled with a quiet satisfaction. For once, her work and her worth were undeniable. Elias approached her afterward, his expression one of admiration and pride. He didn't need to say much, his presence alone conveyed everything she had struggled to believe about herself. He saw her not as small or insignificant but as someone who had risen above every challenge with grace and determination. In that moment, Aravana realized that his belief in her had never wavered, even when hers had. It wasn't pity or obligation that drove his actions but genuine respect and care. The aftermath of the project brought changes that rippled far beyond Aravana's personal journey. The Xaverians, though slow to abandon their entrenched biases, began to acknowledge the flaws in their hierarchical system. Conversations sparked by Aravana's contributions led to broader discussions about valuing individuals for their skills and character rather than their physical attributes. It wasn't a revolution, but it was a start, a seed of change that might one day grow into something greater. For the humans, the collaboration was a testament to the power of diversity and mutual respect. Their willingness to embrace different perspectives and challenge assumptions had not only strengthened the alliance but also deepened their understanding of the Xaverians. Elias, in particular, emerged as a bridge between the two cultures, his relationship with Aravana symbolizing the potential for connection that transcended physical differences and societal norms. Aravana, too, found herself transformed by the experience. Her success in the project wasn't just a validation of her skills, it was a redefinition of her self-worth. The doubts that had once held her back no longer felt insurmountable. She began to see herself not as the exception to the rule but as proof that the rule itself was flawed. Her stature, once a source of shame, became a symbol of her resilience and adaptability. Her bond with Elias deepened in ways that surprised them both. What had begun as professional respect grew into something more profound, built on trust, understanding, and a shared belief in each other's potential. Elias never treated Aravana as someone who needed saving. Instead, he recognized her as someone who had always been capable but had rarely been given the chance to prove it. Their connection wasn't defined by their differences but by the ways they complemented and challenged each other. The alliance between humans and Xaverians flourished in the wake of the project's success, and Aravana became an unofficial ambassador of sorts. Her story, once one of quiet struggle, now inspired others to question the limitations they had accepted as unchangeable. While she remained humble about her role, she couldn't deny the impact she had made. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just by others but by herself. Elias, ever the pragmatist, reminded her that their work was far from over. The collaboration had been a victory, but the deeper changes required to reshape Xaverian society would take time and persistence. Aravana, bolstered by her newfound confidence, embraced the challenge. She had spent so long believing that she was too small to make a difference, but now she understood that even the smallest among them could cast a long shadow. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Aravana found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The doubts and fears that had once consumed her now felt like distant echoes. She wasn't defined by her height, or by the prejudices of her society. She was defined by her actions, her choices, and the connections she had forged. And in Elias, she had found someone who saw her not for what she lacked but for all that she was. Their parting wasn't the end of their story but the beginning of something new. The alliance between their species was stronger than ever, and the bond they shared promised to grow, no matter the distance between them. Aravana stood tall, not in stature but in spirit, ready to face whatever came next. For the first time, she believed that she wasn't too small for love or for greatness. She had always been enough, and now the universe knew it too.